Join us for part 2 of how to have those hard conversations with your staff. We all know that in addition to hearing a lecture or reading good information or sitting through a session, it's really helpful for our staff to run through scenarios, putting to use what they've learned. We've invited HR consultant Diane Slater back to our podcast to do just that. Running camp should be about people, not paperwork. UltraCamp helps you manage staff, registration, and communication in one place, so you spend less time on tasks and more on camp. Find out more at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Welcome, everybody, to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. We've been podcasting for 11 seasons and knew we just needed to continue because just like people grow and change, so does our industry. So here we are, ready to discuss new challenges, new ways of handling situations, new advice from those on the ground, and new ideas to help us all do our jobs better. Our commitment to intentional leadership training grows stronger every year. And welcome to another episode of Camp Code with Diane Slater. So we're so happy to have you back for part 2. But before we get into these scenarios, we'll begin with introductions. So Gabs, could you go first, please?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. I'm known at Camp Wara, where I work, as Gaz. My pronouns are she, her, and elle. And Camp Wara is a camp for girls and gender minorities, and we focus on creating a positive environment in both French and English.
Lovely. And as I said, we're super thrilled to welcome back HR consultant and Waro alumnus, Diane Slater. So Diane, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Certainly. Diane Slater, back in the day, Dee Dee Dubé at camp, where I went for 10 years as a camper, CIT, and counselor. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm delighted to be joining you again.
We are too. So I'm Beth Allison, co-owner of Camp Hacker and Go Camp Pro, and my pronouns are also she and her. I am a camp consultant and a trainer and author, and I love talking about leadership training. So we are excited to dive back in because we just didn't have enough time to get to all the information last time. So Diane, thanks so much for joining us again. In one of our last couple of podcasts, Diane talked to us about how to have hard conversations with our staff and our campers and parents and boards and so on. And there was so much great information. We ran out of time to go through the scenarios that Gabs came up with. So we've asked her back to pick her brain a little bit more. So let's not waste any time and just jump right in. So Gab, would you like to give Diane her first scenario, please?
Yes. And I love, Beth, how you said that I came up with. I will say that I didn't have to come up with it. These are straight up Camp Wara examples. I've also created titles.
Fair enough.
So
Fair enough.
Starting with the defensive star. So basically, Diane, in any organization, I'm sure camps are no exception to this. There are people that are really well liked on camp. They're very good at their job. This person tends to be very defensive every time she's given feedback. She insists that she's doing the best that she can, and that the feedback is you can tell it's just not absorbed. How do you address this without alienating her, from the rest of the team, or that she's not just absorbing that feedback?
That's a great one because I kind of, my 17-year-old self identifies with that example.
Yes.
And my almost 30 years of human resources self goes, wow, a lot of that one has to do with maturity. But then, of course, we do encounter mature older folks who behave the exact same way. I think one of the key things in any of the scenarios we're going to talk about, of course, and we talked about last time, was establishing safety. So, of course, creating that environment where, you do spend, and I hate to sound cynical, but 30 seconds to a minute on the empathy piece. And then back to business because you are running a business. And I think with the defensive star, there's a little bit of the patting on the head behavior. Yes, we know you're a star. We know you're well liked. We love that about you. That's amazing. And then hold up the mirror. And make sure as you hold up the mirror that mirror is pointing out a behavior and not a motivation, because we're not inside that person's head. We don't know why they're defensive. For all we know, they get harped on at home all the time that they're not as good as their older sibling. Who knows? So it's really important to hold up that mirror and explain, what I'm hearing from you is that there's a reason for this, and it's a reason you feel is, perhaps out of your control, or you're not willing to, from my perspective, hear what I have to say, and I'm not sure I understand why, but it makes it difficult for me to convey feedback to you. And then for some, maybe it's even allowing them to process it, because the defensiveness could come from how fast their brain processes information. I'm that person who wishes that, I could process 10 seconds faster. You hang up the phone and then you think of your answer, or
Oh,
your
that's me
chat, or
too.
oh, I wish I had said. Right?
That
I
is
come up
me
with
to a
yeah.
T.
5 minutes later, I come up with a great joke. Well,
Or a comeback. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So it can be that
You
with
two
someone who
together is dangerous. I just want to say, if you two ever merge in the same space, I would love to be there for it.
would have a lot of fun.
I think so too.
But yeah, I think it's also a possibility with some people that you give them some processing time as well, because that might just be a go-to because they don't know how to react yet because they haven't taken it fully in. And it might feel bad initially, but when they think about it, they go, oh, gosh, yes, that actually might be true about me. So that's a possibility as well. But I think, yeah, the defensive one is definitely a hold up the mirror for that person. Help them see what you're seeing when they answer defensively.
Mhm.
I think I would like to work at any company that you are the HR consultant for. Just
Wow.
because I think you're so wise and patient and calm about it, which is great, laying out that information. Okay, so I have a scenario for you that never happens at camp, never did at a camp I ever ran, but when we want to talk about gossip, so I don't know if it's the same in day camp. I can't speak to that. But when you're living up in the woods with a group of people for 2 straight months, sometimes 3 or 4, the gossip loop becomes kind of like the television or the TikTok. So what do you do with a staff member who you have to speak to them maybe about their tone with campers or something like that, but they then go and vent to others that the leadership team doesn't like me or has, something to say about it. How do you step in to prevent that negativity while keeping confidentiality and helping that person to understand why this is harmful?
That's a good one, because I find when people don't have all of the thousands of pieces of information coming at them that they're used to, gossip also becomes currency, and she who
Yes.
had most gossip wins. Even if the gossip is about yourself, that can be okay, right? It's a form of self-deprecating humor. It's a good little currency in an environment where everyone doesn't have their phone going all the time. And I think that that's a really important one to help people, first of all, understand why you're getting the feedback, and then the impact of the feedback. Because interestingly, if you're telling someone, hey, as a great example, your tone with the campers might have left one of the campers feeling hurt, you can then actually turn it around and say, and when it came full circle back to me that you vented about our session and told everyone that I don't like you, that hurt me as well. So it's actually part of the initial feedback I gave you. Because often that behavior will be linked to what it was they did to begin with. Because most people don't have, huge volumes of flaws. They have one or two things that are their weakness or their overused strength sometimes as well. The great communicator sometimes turns into the biggest gossip because they're so busy communicating, they forget to create that barrier of what's appropriate and what's not. But I think a lot of it is back to understanding intentions of the person. I think we talked that a little bit last time, in that concept of people don't do things to you. They do things for themselves. And when someone goes and shares, I got negative feedback, odds are that they're not in it to look bad to their peers. They're in it for something else. And at that age, frequently what I find, and actually at all ages in the workplace as well, is that people are trying to rally forces to their side so that they will have support. They will feel like they're not alone in their feedback or alone in being, as they might have felt, targeted in some sort of negative conversation, even if the intention is growth. So I think it's really important to nip that one in the bud pretty early as soon as you hear about it. But saying, like, when it came back to me also helps them realize there is no expectation of privacy in a summer camp, right? So
Very true.
we have the same in our stores where I work, and we actually sometimes create gossip for good. We will start a rumor that we want people to know, but we phrase it a little bit of like a, "Shh, I'm not supposed to tell you, but," and then we'll spread a rumor to see how fast it goes, and it goes pretty darned quickly. So nipping it in the bud and reminding them, when you do that, you feel better. How do you think you left the people you talk to feeling? Is another one, right? Especially if it's someone who's generally well-intentioned. They don't want to ruin the experience for other people.
It's interesting. I think that gossip is a hot topic, and we could definitely get into that a little bit further. And that's another conversation. And gossip's tough because also on the socials right now, gossip is framed as this power exchange in a positive way. It's how you stay safe. So if there's that, boss that, you should never be alone in his office with, gossip protects you from that. Or there's a lot of this type of thing. And I think what we're talking about here is, for me, there's venting, and then there's gossiping. And gossiping is I'm not here to problem solve. I'm here to, see what you're trying to get out of it. But I think with the gossip piece also is sometimes you have to give feedback to a staff member that is going to rally. And a lot of times for me, it's a staff member that really just doesn't handle feedback well and takes it extremely personally. So it hurts them. And there's only two ways energy can go, inward or outward, right? So I'm either angry at myself or I'm angry outwardly, So so you can tell pretty quickly who are the ones that will go inward and who are the ones that will go outward. Would you suggest to talk to them about, or not to caution them, but to say, I'm concerned that this feedback might be tough, because I've noticed sometimes when we've provided feedback, and it seems like, would you try to set them up for success and say, don't gossip? By the way, I know you might, and don't do that. What would you say in that situation? So it doesn't actually go around, because then you're having to clean up another mess.
I'm guessing that in pre-camp and in leadership training, staff training, there's some area in which you address the concept of, here's when you'll get feedback. We will do an exit interview at the end of the summer with feedback. Here's generally how the flow of camp works. And in that scenario, one of the things you can address very quickly and easily is the concept of, feedback is private and confidential, but it's not top secret. You're allowed to talk about your own life. However, when you receive feedback, it's an art. It's a skill that we're developing in you, right? We want you to learn and grow. We want every summer to be a newer, bigger, fresher experience for you, so that you're not having the same summer of experience over and over and over. So that when you're 25 years old, you're having the exact same experience as when you're 18 years old. We want you to learn and grow. And learning how to take feedback is how you learn and grow. It's how you get promotions. It's how you experience life more fully. Even an individual who wants to stay in the exact same job for 30 years will change and grow. I mean, we have an assistant in our workplace who, when she joined, she laughs. They gave her a typewriter. And she's like, what is this nonsense? Haven't you people heard of computers? So they gave her the big hulking desktop. And now she helps us with our systems. She's learned so much, but she's still technically in the same role. So it's a little bit of that. And then when you're doing the individual feedback, you can relay it back to a generic message that everyone got, so they won't feel attacked by the message. But a reminder of, when I've given you feedback, it's come back to me that you talk about it fairly widespread. And I would ask you, how do you think that lands for other people, right? What's your intention when you share it with other people, and how do you think it lands for them? And if you're speaking about negative topics, it can only yield negative energy. I've never been privy to a negative topic conversation that yielded positive energy. And so you can put it back to them in that way as well. And when you ask the intention versus how it lands question, then you're also not making an assumption, right? Like, what was your aim? And, is there something that I could be helping you with as the giver of feedback? Because I know feedback is hard, but it should also be considered a gift. And I know that that's hard, but let's see what we can do to help it land with you as a gift to help your growth.
We are off to an excellent start, and we are just going to take a quick moment to hear from our wonderful sponsor, and we will be right back. For Camp Code listeners, unlock Ultra Camp's operations checklist for new directors, a free download to help you prepare for a smooth season. Find it at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. Running camp comes with countless moving parts. Ultra Camp helps you stay on top of them. Organize activities and daily schedules, manage wait lists and cabin assignments, automate billing and payments, centralize all camper and staff info in one place. With UltraCamp, camp operations run smoother, so directors can lead with confidence. Book your free customized demo at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode. And we're back, and Gab has another question for Diane Slater.
I do. So again, totally anonymous, never happened before, but the chronic excuse maker, very different than seems similar to the defensive star, but they have answers for everything, but they're excuses. So fatigue, confusion, someone else's fault. How can a leader cut through excuses and guide that person towards accountability?
Oh, that's a tough one. The big
Yeah.
accountability word. And
Yeah.
a lot of people struggle with that because then they feel like there's some personal blame or fault when things go wrong. And it's one of those things that some people really struggle with. My suggestion on that one is try to break it down for them. Okay, I hear what you're saying, right? But what part of this might you control, right? You can't control that it's raining. But might you control that you plan an activity that's in a less muddy part of the camp? You can't control other people's reactions, but you can control your own. So when someone was aggressive with you, you could step back and take a deep breath before you answer. You know, you can't control that you have a kid on the autism spectrum, but you can control knowing that at that age, there are no bad kids. The odds of an actual psychopath or sociopath showing up are pretty limited. So you have the ability to control your reaction, right? So what can you control in this situation? And in a very genuine way. And until such time as they actually take accountability for one little tiny piece, you can use the 5 whys technique. We tend to use it in health and safety, where you ask why 5 times to get to the core of why a particular accident or incident occurred so that you know where the training or the tool or the process or whatever you need actually exists, right? People don't rear end other people just because they're driving a vehicle. They rear end someone because maybe they were texting, and maybe they were texting because they didn't have, you know, a voice control on their phone, and maybe they didn't have a voice control on their phone because they failed to communicate to their manager that they needed that, right? So asking why in a non-5-year-old annoying type of way can be helpful. And then if they do eventually take ownership of something they can control, then you can move to the prevention questions. And if you move to prevention, then you're not saying, you know, where did you go wrong? You're saying, all right, what could we do to prevent that next time? Well, and eventually it's a rare situation where you wouldn't get someone to, oh, well, I guess if I got the kids to bring their rain boots, or I guess if I had taken the time to explain that the Sunday schedule is different from all the other days, so my kid on the spectrum didn't feel overwhelmed, or whatever the situation might be, eventually they will take ownership without realizing they've taken ownership. And then you can praise them for taking ownership and going, oh, I really appreciate that you took accountability for that piece, because it means that you've learned and you've grown from that, and you can help other people think of some of those great ideas too. You know, depending on the scenario, you can actually praise them into doing the right thing. It's a little bit of Pavlovian conditioning. Throw them the chocolate when they do the right thing.
I love it.
That's amazing. So our next question, Diane, I think really can apply to new directors, whether it's like their first time directing ever or at that particular camp, that particular site, or dealing with campers who've been there forever and then become staff. And so putting those two scenarios together, you often get staff members who consistently challenge decisions of the new director. Like, that's not the way we used to do it, you know, that sort of thing. And then but they've been there for so long that they expect that their preferences will take priority. Now they have real passion, but their tone crosses into entitlement.
Mhm.
So how do you reestablish respect or establish it in the first place if you're just getting to know them, and while you're still keeping them engaged and wanting to be a part of the team and the community that you're trying to build?
That's a great question, and there's a lot of steps you can take before you get to the, "Well, I'm the boss" card,
Yes.
which is very like the "because I'm your parent and I told you so," and not very helpful for buy-in. I think one of the most important things is actually laying out for the person the impact they're having. So, potentially even asking the question, "How do you think others experience working with you?" Right? What are your thoughts, just generally? And then gently guide them to the concept that, change is actually good, positive change, and sometimes the change might be wrong. I know I have my own kid who's a staff member this past summer who texted me and said, "Mom, I have a suggestion for Gabs, and I don't know how to approach it because I think we've gone with the overused strength, right? Where we're changing the words to some, songs or things to make it more inclusive for all, but perhaps we've gone too far where some things it actually is taking away the history or the social impact of a particular lyric to a particular song, or if it's an indigenous song, we're actually taking away some of the original intent, right?" And so it was an actually really interesting conversation to have with a 17-year-old where it's like, yeah, sometimes change has gone too far. So sometimes that can be okay. But really, how are others experiencing working with you is that high impact question where hopefully you can steer someone to understanding that they need to tone it down. The other thing is understanding, the concept that some things are standard for everybody, right? Like there might be rules that are standard for everybody if someone's feeling entitled because they've been there longer, and some things are earned. And I had a boss years ago who early in my career taught me, like, you can't cash in credits you haven't yet earned, right? So you can challenge me once you've earned the right to do so. So if you've been a camp counselor for 3 minutes versus I've been directing this camp for 10, 20, 25 years, or if you're putting it in a positive, curious way, that's one thing. But until such time as you've earned some credits and some credibility, you have to be very difficult. We have to be very careful how you challenge or you come across as difficult, right? So helping people approach with curiosity. Hey, Gabs, I remember when I was at camp, you weren't allowed to wear jeans for dinner, and now it's like people are roaming about in jeans everywhere. What's that about? And then the explanation is, frankly, I don't understand why you weren't allowed to wear jeans for dinner in Haiti. Because jeans keep you warm in a dining room that's very big and can get cold. So we decided it was a strange rule and we changed it. Oh, thanks. I was curious, right? Versus, what are you doing? You changed everything. So there's so much wrapped up in entitlement and really up to get
Yes.
the heart of what it is, right? It's so many different forms of entitlement. Yeah, and I think we as receivers of that entitled feedback have to approach with curiosity as well to uncover it. I know when we go to the reunions at Waro, there's a group of us who are highly obnoxious and insist on singing all the old songs and using all the old lyrics and making a giant fuss every 5 years about how we're wearing jeans in the dining room at dinner. And we think we're hilarious, but we do it every 5 years. And Gabs is so lovely and just smiles and nods and said, "Yes, yes, good kids. Aren't you lovely?" But understanding the why, and for us, the why is just nostalgia, right? It's nothing else. But for others, it's truly angry. And sometimes it comes from a place of lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
We did have some at our last reunion, we had some alumni who asked some very pointed questions, but because they had just been more sheltered from sort of the cultural evolution of how we experience the Indigenous people of Canada and the fact that we're using their land and the honor and respect and traditions that they have and how we should be treating them. And they asked some questions that made a few of us raise an eyebrow, but it just came from a place with lack of knowledge. So sometimes that sentiment of entitlement isn't that at all. It's just, oh gosh, like I missed the memo on that because I'm retired and, people don't explain things on the news. They just report quickly in snippets. That was a really long answer that encompassed about 15 different scenarios in one. So
That's
you
great.
can
That's
admit
great.
that into a couple of answers.
I would say no. Well, I think being challenged is difficult, and I get challenged all the time, and I am there for 20 years, and I you know that because I call you and say, I mean, some staff members want all of the things, and they want Camp Waro to be perfect, and it's not. It's an evolving, learning organism of a collective group that are just trying to do their best. And sometimes when you're younger, you expect better, and I like the better, but there is a balance. So I think helping to create that balance and bringing people in behind the scenes to show what's possible. And you helped me this summer by just sharing with a staff member, I love where you're coming from. I love these ideas. We're in the midst of starting camp. We can't implement changes right now. We do that throughout the fall, winter, and spring. That's where we really, look at change and how we can implement those changes, and let's do that. Or vice versa. We have put some time and thought into this change. I wasn't the only one that came up with this. Was a group decision. I'm glad you brought it up. If we could talk about this more, but just letting you know, the summer won't be shifted. And then if their behaviors do shift, and this is what you've taught me too, afterwards they become disgruntled, passive aggressive, we can bring up the timeline and say, it seems like this is when you brought this up to me and it didn't go your way. This is what this is what I've noticed as a shift. Maybe I'm missing a piece of the story. Can you help me understand why there is a shift? Which brings me to my next question. This is one we haven't gone through yet, Diane, but something that you and I have dealt with, and I think it's really, really helpful. What are the pitfalls that managers fall into when they're dealing with a staff member that either gets extremely emotional, like, maybe makes you feel very empathetic for them, and you can't get to the main issue because they're so upset, slash also staff members that sort of flat out deny, like, no, I was never in that cabin that I wasn't supposed to be in, that never happened. When you actually saw them come out of that one specific cabin that they're not supposed to be in, you come out and you're like, no, this actually really happened. Or they come in late for work and you try to talk to them about it and they say, no, I arrived on time. What do you mean? What are some of the pitfalls with people that get distracted by the end point, which I often do get distracted. I want to talk about them arriving on time, or I want to talk about something, but either their emotions are flat out disagreeing with me. I get tangled into that. What are some pitfalls that happen, as well as what are some solutions?
Think that yes, it happens to a lot of us, and I'm one of those people who sometimes gets taken in by a really nice story and I believe it. I'm not cynical enough in the moment because I like to assume best intentions, and I like to assume to have trust until such time as trust is broken, versus you have to start at zero and earn all your trust with me. The pitfall to that, of course, can be, like you said, you get distracted from the key central issue, or for some people, yes, it's the tears. It's why I would recommend that in any conversation, even if it's with someone who you think the conversation will be really easy, is to take the time to jot down a few notes, whether you're a mental notes person or whether you're a Post-it notes or a notebook or a computer, whatever it is. If it's someone who the conversation will be fairly easy, 3 short bullets of 4 words. Here's what I'm trying to get at. But if it's someone where it's going to be more complicated, actually take the time to craft your message a little more. And almost like you're going to do a presentation, or, back in school when you'd stand up in front of the class and rehearse it a little bit. Not to the point where you're reciting some bizarre monologue and the person gets lost and left behind, but so that you don't forget what your central points were, and that way you can keep coming back to them. You can even have it in front of you. There's no reason why you can't have a piece of paper or a notebook in front of you when you're speaking to someone. The tears is an interesting one. I get teased sometimes that I forget the human emotion, but I don't tend to get swayed by tears in a way other people do. But the tears are a hard one because our natural instinct for many is comfort and not tears. And that's the one where I would encourage you to learn the phrase, I understand that you're upset. However, you're being paid to do a job and we really need to have this conversation. I can give you 5 minutes, then come back and we're going to keep going, right? You don't want to give them days and hours and weeks, because then they're just deferring and they're going to eventually hope that you forget about it and go away. You give them 5 minutes to splash cold water in their face and carry on. But it's tough. It takes discipline on the part of the person giving the feedback to get through that, if that's what's, the hard one.
Yeah.
When someone flat out lies, and it does happen.
Yes.
I mean, you could catch someone on camera doing something and somehow they will still deny it. And it's mystifying to me, or you see it with your own eyes. There is a place for saying, listen, I know that it's hard to hear that you were caught doing something wrong. However, I heard you or saw you or whatever the case was, and you're not going to get out of it that easily because I saw it. Okay. So this isn't a debate. This isn't a negotiation. This is a fact. And so what we're going to do is talk about what are the consequences of that fact, and just always bring it back to facts, right? Don't worry about their intentions. Don't worry about what motivated them to lie. Just bring it back to facts and try to keep the emotions out of it, because clearly they're pretty upset, likely, or terrified they're about to get fired, or who knows, maybe they grew up with a parent who still hit them with a wooden spoon like it was the 1980s. So they're scared of something. But it's, again, back to the facts.
I love that. And I think tears isn't something that triggers me. Honestly, anger does, and sort of lying, because I find those two things quite difficult to manage. But I do find it helpful. What you're saying is saying, I'm noticing that your energy has shifted, or yes, I did hear you, and feedback is an important part of the process. It's an important part of the work that we do here. So I'd like to continue with the feedback so that we can have a productive conversation and understand, where you're coming from, but also understand what solutions we can put in place. And I think that has helped me, especially the tear piece. I'm like, well, they're crying, and I say, I notice you're upset. You need a moment, and then we can come back to this. But sometimes when I get something that's very aggressive or angry, I get flustered. So those notes, I think, are very helpful. But Jackie Rill, she falls for the tears. Oh, she falls for the tears.
I used to.
Yeah.
I used to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the older I got, the less I did, but I used to. But I
Mhm.
mean, and everybody feels feelings in different ways. So
100%.
it's just one of those things that getting in trouble or thinking you're getting in trouble can cause a myriad of emotions, including lying, because you're trying to get out of it somehow, that it wasn't your fault in some way, that you're not responsible. So,
and I'm not suggesting that people are trying to manipulate us by going with tears. When I say falling for tears, it's just, you have tears and you're allowed to have them.
Right. That some people just do. I have a very dear friend who every time she gets mad, she cries.
It's so frustrating. I'm one of those people too.
Right. And she gets very upset because then she thinks her points don't come across as she would like them to, but she's angry. She's not sad.
I know.
It feels embarrassing because you feel like, credibility is shot because you just started crying.
Right.
So the validation of the emotions is a really good point also, actually. So it's validating it. It's okay.
You're allowed to have your feelings.
All the feelings. It's just not okay to have all the behaviors. So feel your feelings, but you have to behave in a certain way.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting. A lot of people believe that you can't control your emotions, but it's actually something you absolutely can learn to do. I mean, you think about a 2-year-old having a temper tantrum on the floor of the airport because you didn't hand them a cookie in the right moment. I really sincerely doubt that you're having that experience as an adult, traveling, off with your partner, and you don't get the cookie you wanted right away. You're probably not lying on the floor crying. And it's exactly the same thing. There are certain physiological responses you cannot control. My face turns red. Some people cry, sweaty palms, tunnel vision, all these things. But you can't teach yourself to take a deep breath and pause before you answer and have that really quick flash of, okay, what point was I trying to make? And how do I stick to my point and not let this adrenaline surge control me?
Exactly. All right. Final question is the final straw.
Mm-hmm.
So you've had multiple feedback sessions and reminders, but a staff member still continues unsafe or unprofessional behavior. How do you approach the conversation to end employment while minimizing harm to the staff member and camp's reputation?
Great one. So interestingly, part of the struggle is often also making that decision that it's time to have that conversation. And so the way I frame it up, both in my own mind or with whoever I'm working with, that it's time, and then how to have the conversation, is reminding yourself, in this case, The first responsibility for a staff member is to the camper and the camper's safety, as well as to the integrity of that experience at camp as a paying customer for a particular experience for the summer. And then looking at the concepts of safety, trust, and team impact, and taking away the thought that there's some personal failure involved. The person's not a bad person. You haven't failed necessarily. You're not a bad person either. But you've made a determination that this person can't, either safely or reliably do what's required in the role, or for whatever reason, you can't trust them unsupervised with either the campers or tasks that are critical to their programs to do the job, so they can no longer stay. And so crafting a message that's appropriate to whatever theme it is that caused you to make the decision is key. And then you keep it really short and sweet, right? Literally direct, short. Unfortunately, we've decided to end your appointment effective today. We just find that your obsession with playing frisbee golf in every spare moment and neglecting your campers has become problematic, and we feel that camper safety is in jeopardy because, they were off swimming without a counselor. When you get that person who's argumentative or starts crying or wants to debate it, it's okay to state this is a decision, not a discussion. You do not have to give them arms full of feedback at that time, because that's what you've been doing with them leading up to this meeting. This meeting is the one where you say, we've talked about this. You had a document with feedback in it and expectations. If you're at Waro, it would be a puddle time ponder. If you're in my workplace, it would be either a coaching plan or a performance improvement plan. And it's about, unfortunately, we didn't have success with those different interventions that we tried, and it's just no longer a fit. You do want to protect their dignity. So offering to pack up their stuff with them or for them at a moment when others aren't around. So maybe there's a big evening program and 2 staff members or a staff member and the person who's being let go can go help them pack. One of the things I've always loved about the dignity Camp Oro provides is offering them a drive. I know Gabs and staff members have driven people down to Montreal, to train stations, to airports, whatever it is, generously offering train tickets, plane tickets sometimes, making sure these guys are taken care of, have the communication that's required, and then reminding them about confidentiality. It depends on what you put in your employment contracts, but generally speaking, there are clauses that speak to confidentiality. Not talking about the kids because they are customers, paying customers, and it's their private business, and not having all kinds of negative conversation about the camp itself either is generally something that may or may not be in a contract. But if it's in the contract, reminding them of that. And then the last thing I recommend is actually documenting what happened. Because
100%.
fortunately it doesn't always, but occasionally you get litigious mom and dad or, angry camper who come back and potentially make claims, but people have up to 2 years to come back at you with stuff. And so, in my environment, we always send either an email or write up a document and put it into the employee file that just documents, like, we sat down around 2 p.m. on Wednesday, had the conversation, the employee had no questions, took the document away, and we'll review it and then sign back. Or, argued this point, that point, or got really angry, stormed into the hallway, shouted these words, right? So we get very specific, especially if something goes wrong, for when claims are made later, because it's why witnesses are actually not that great in court. We reinvent our memories. And when your adrenaline is surging, the odds of remembering what you said are pretty limited. And when you're sad or angry, sometimes you blurt stuff out and then later you might not remember that or have a different memory of it. And if you've documented it in the moment, especially, I recommend always having 2 people in those discussions so that you have a shared documentation and a shared understanding.
Yes.
Because generally shared delusion is not a thing when you have 2 people writing it down immediately afterwards and agreeing to it. So that's the general guidelines that helps protect people's dignity, helps protect their rights as well from a legal standpoint, and just makes the conversation easier for you as well when you just stick to simple fact, not a big long drawn out discussion.
Because it's never easy.
No, it's hard.
It's
very
hard.
hard.
It's very
If it
hard.
gets
Yeah,
easy, then you know that you have a bit of a problem, a bit of a power
that's right.
problem.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I've been taking copious notes here, but Gabrielle, I
Oh
would
my
like to
gosh.
hear your recap of it
I
all.
love recap. Okay, team, we got a lot from Diane today. That's why we needed a second part. So I'm looking at this really as a road trip metaphor. The gas that we put into the car, that's what keeps the conversation going. So one of the things that Diane brought up is empathy, dignity, and acknowledged effort. So we want to find time when chatting with our staff members, some empathy that this is a tough situation, that we're doing it at a time and a moment that they can maintain that dignity, and we're acknowledging the effort that they've already done. We want them to be a partner on this road trip. The second piece is the map reading. And in the map reading, it's really important. And I think sometimes we forget this. Our observations, our experiences of things are really, really helpful when giving feedback. So my experience of you in the dining room is X. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And then give them the map and ask them to describe a little bit what they experienced during the dining room. Or I understand this is upsetting for you. Would you like to take time 5 minutes and then let's come back? The idea of the map is that we do have to stay on track. We can't go off course too much. So we can use our own experiences and then bring that back. And like any good road trip, you want to do a little bit of planning beforehand. So jotting down some notes, maybe talking about over with somebody else the rough patches that you might go through, problem solving, how you can answer maybe some tough things that they might bring up and might use as a defense mechanism. Chat it out, map it out, write it down so that you can be empathetic, treat them with dignity, but at the same time staying on course.
And such a good recap. I was writing more notes during the recap. Okay. Thanks, Gab.
Thank you.
We love to hear from all of you. So please let us know any topics you'd like us to discuss, any great leadership training tips you have to share, or any brilliant guests like Diane Slater that you recommend we have on the show. We would love to hear from you. And if you found our podcast to be useful, we would love it if you'd leave us a rating and a review in your podcasting app. Now, where can folks find out about what you do? Gabrielle, where can they connect with you?
Well, you can check out where I work at waro.com, and you can get in touch with me at info@waro.com. Waro is spelled Ouareau.
Thank you. And Diane, how about you?
You can find me at diane.e.slater@gmail.com, and that's Diane with one N. Or you can find me on LinkedIn as well, and I'm happy to respond to HR-based questions.
Oh, I would take her up on that one, everybody. Take her up on that.
Yes, absolutely.
You can find out what I do at gocamp.pro or email me directly at beth@gocamp.pro. And for our next podcast, this will be a surprise to Gab because I kind of made it up before the recording started, but challenges faced by children today and what that means for staff training. Is that okay with you, Gab?
I have so much to say on this topic.
Okay. And we will squeeze the last bit of information we can out of Diane, and we'll leave her with the best practice.
Yeah, so I think the best practice in all of this, we talked about a little bit what happens when things just aren't working out, and unfortunately you need to exit someone. And what you can't forget is that there's a whole bunch of people who are left still working, and potentially their good friend or their nemesis just exited camp. You also have to remember that everyone who's been left behind receives and takes in information differently. So you'll have your kids who are potentially a little bit on the autism spectrum who will take it in as well. They broke the rules. They should be good like me, a little bit of self-righteousness, follow the rules like me, and all would have been well for you. You'll have the people who go, oh, thank God, the Wicked Witch is dead. This is amazing. And then maybe want to gossip about them. And then you'll have your friends left behind going, crying. The gossip network might start. So it's really important that you take 3 key steps. One is debriefing with your leadership, right? And talking about what signs did we miss, potentially as early as the interview phase. How could we ask questions differently that might uncover some of the problem behaviors in the interview phase? Or how can we prevent it earlier next time? Did we maybe let it fester a little too long and it turned into something unsolvable? Then you're going to want to support the remaining team where you don't want to go into detailed information about what happened as you would with your leader team, but frame it as a decision that was made for the good or the safety of the campers, or potentially morale if people were feeling it. You want to keep it very high level, protect the dignity and privacy of the person exited, but you want to address it and acknowledge that people will experience it differently, and that if anyone feels that they need to talk about it to process it, that they're welcome to come and talk to a member of the leadership team. And then monitoring morale, right? Because you don't know what those experiences will be, right? Relief, anxious, and whatever happens, you want to acknowledge that those are okay responses, because some might even experience a couple of those things. They might be both relieved and sad and not understand why. So just acknowledging that the emotions are normal, and it's tough when someone's asked to leave, and reassuring people that if you're doing something that isn't favorable, you will be very clear about it, communicate with them, and this didn't come out of nowhere.
Perfect wrap up.
So
Perfect wrap
good.
up.
And I would say, I just want to say to the listeners out there, Beth and I have both been supported camps who had a lot of staff that left all at once, sometimes because of a specific incident or because of just bad luck of, one staff member after another. This is really difficult to manage. So if you are in a situation where you don't know how to let somebody go, or there's multitudes of staff members going and it's going to affect your morale, please do reach out. I'm a little bit more busy during the summertime, but Beth is available and we'll find somebody for you to chat with. It is not easy to go through, and supporting each other is really important in those camp moments for the summer. So you're not alone. We've been through it. Do reach out.
Absolutely. Thanks for that, Gab. Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network, and you can check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts. Thank you so much for joining us today, and a very special thank you to Diane Slater for being here once more and walking us through scenarios to help us learn even more about how to have those difficult conversations. We're so very grateful to you, Diane. And thanks for the listening, friends. Camp Hacker, bringing your world into focus.